Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and today we are on to the next part of the Risk of Rain tier list. We've been here before, let's just get to it. We're almost done. We got the equipments up next. So equipments are obviously a special type of item. They fill up a slot on your character, and generally have some sort of powerful effect, high damage output, disruption, mobility, whatever it may be. Again, this tier list is mainly based on my personal opinion. I know if you want to math it out, I may not exactly be right, but this is off of what I generally do. Let's get into it. So first things first, DML, rock solid equipment. Mainly with ICBM, so I'm probably going to drop it down to around here. I think DML is just, it's really solid. Obviously, fires off 12 homing rockets that'll do pretty consistent damage. It's useful for horde clearing. It's useful for single target damage if you just get really close to a boss. And activate DML, the rockets launched will go straight into the boss, especially on things like Wandering Graverant or Soulless Control Unit. Overall, I quite enjoy the DML. It's just solid, rock solid. Foreign Fruit is not very good, in my opinion. It is funny, though, which definitely earns it some points. I'll probably drop it around the funny reds. The main reason I put it there is just because if you get enough Gestures of the Drowned, you'll be healing 50% of your max HP every second, which can make it very hard for those Risk of Rain 2 moments where even though you're at full health, you get hit and instantly die. This, drastically reduces that because you could simply heal back the damage as soon as you take it, and it does feel rather fun to be effectively immortal when it comes to taking damage. Also makes things like Blaze Elites or Mushrooms a lot less annoying to fight. Black Hole is, again, rock solid equipment. It just groups enemies up, and more useful on some survivors than others. The ones that come to mind, Railgunner, Loader really enjoy it, but everyone can use it not only as a get-off-me tool, but just to group enemies up. It makes, explosives more effective. It makes, if you're playing Commando with his piercing mouse too, obviously, super useful. Group everyone up, hit him with the mouse too. It'll do a lot of damage to whoever hits that last. And I think it's just overall, really solid. I quite like Black Hole, or what is it called, like Portable Darkness Cube or something like that. I would just call it Black Hole, right? Ocular HUD is probably more of like a fine sort of tier item, where it has its uses, but I genuinely don't find it the most useful. It can give you potentially permanent crit via Gestures of the Drowned, which wouldn't be too hard as its cooldown's not super long. But it's not what I would consider the most useful equipment. It's fine, totally middle of the road. Remember, if something's in B tier, doesn't mean it's bad, just means that it's generally overshadowed. The backup is not very good. The backup's main use is just with, like, Colonel Drone Man and Captain, just to give you more projectile shields, because the drones themselves are fine, but it's on a monstrously long cooldown, which is its main downside. It's like, 110 seconds before you can use it again? Of course, the drones do last for 60 seconds, assuming they don't die, but without Colonel Drone Man, this may as well be a dead equipment slot. Prion Accumulator is really solid. This is one of the sort of Mithrix cheese equipments that I like to use. When he's stealing your items right near the end of that sequence, just shoot out a Prion Accumulator, and it will generally hit him hard enough to give you a lot of your items back and make the rest of that phase a cakewalk, which I think earns it a slightly higher place. I'm going to put it up around here. I quite like Prion's super long cooldown, but it hits hard enough that I generally don't mind. Milky Chrysalis is pretty solid. I'm going to put it like right near Red Whip, honestly, because it's sort of the equipment form of Red Whip. It's a slightly context-dependent speed boost. It gives you free pillar skip on pretty much every character. I don't think there's a single character that's slow enough to where they can't skip pillars with Milky Chrysalis. But it's not a flashy equipment. It can be fun, though. You can kind of make a sort of like attack helicopter build with like multi, which doesn't really do anything, but it does look cool, just kind of hovering around like a gunship and shooting at your enemies, which is fun. Royal Capacitor, this is probably going to be our first S tier equipment. Royal Capacitor, super good, hits super hard, super short cooldown. This is the easiest Mithrix cheese equipment As soon as he's done stealing your items, hit him with Royal Capacitor. He'll probably lose like 70% of his health and give you most of your items back. Royal Capacitor, just super, super useful. Big damage, fast cooldown. It's pretty... I believe it can miss in very specific circumstances, but against most enemies, it's effectively perfectly accurate. And it's really good. One of my favorite equipments, in terms of damage equipments, that is. Crowdfunder. I'm going to put this right next to Prions. Crowdfunder is mainly a personal thing, the reason I like it so much. It's really good with the Brittle Crown, funnily enough, because it becomes self-sustaining very rapidly. And I tend to quite like sustained characters. So, for example, say I'm playing multi with dual nail guns. Give him a big Crowdfunder, and then you basically just get a third version of your nail guns, which A, looks cool, and B, is very effective. Because the Railgunner, the Crowdfunder does a lot of damage once it gets fully wrapped up. Really like the Crowdfunder, but it is slightly dependent on use case, but I think it's still worth putting it there. This is Gnarled Wood Sprite. And Gnarled Wood Sprite is totally fine. I'm going to put it right next to Foreign Fruit. It's just another form of healing. It is nice that you can give it to your allies. And I think that does at least give it some use as just a fairly middling equipment, but it's just not something I ever really consistently run. And there's really not much to say about it. There's no real strats that revolve around Gnarled Wood Sprite that I could even theorize about. Radar Scanner is pretty awful. Without mods, it doesn't actually reveal that much. And even with it's such a brief reveal of everything on the map that finding things is not super easy. Only reason that I kind of like Radar Scanner is to help with finding very hard to find like newt altars. And even then, it can still get lost in the mix of just trying to find the question mark among the sea of other question marks. Yeah, not great. Next up, Eccentric Vase. This is just the pillar skip equipment. I'm going to put it right next to Milsky Chrysalis. It has almost no uses outside of that. There's specific maps, like Aphelion Sanctuary, where it's useful to get to the frog statue if it's out of reach. But most of the time, it's completely pointless until you get to the moon. And you just hold on to it because you don't want to do pillars, and you don't have Milky Chrysalis or enough speed to do anything. Or you're playing something where you can't do pillars consistently. So, the Eclipse modes, I guess. The Eccentric Vase is like the most boring equipment in the game, but I can't hate it because it is good. It is. Blast Shower. For my understanding, this thing's only use is band spam, because if you get enough of them, it'll constantly be applying. Also useful, I guess, for things like grandparents. But the main use, again, is just making it so you can have infinite uptime on your bands, which with certain survivors, very good. One comes to mind, Railgunner, obviously. Hitting those consistent crit rail bands be very powerful. Can't say I've done it very often, mainly because you do need quite a lot of gestures to get this to a point where that's somewhat effective. But I'll put it... I may be ranking this a little low, but it's just personally. I'm going to put it in low B tier. I've had builds with it where it's good, but overall it's not my favorite. Volcanic Egg is just like worse Chrysalis. I say that. It does have a solid damage explosion, but it's not as easy to control. It doesn't last as long, not as easy to skip pillars with. And you can still take damage when you're in Volcanic Egg, which is very, very counterintuitive since you're quite literally not even there. But I'm going to give it like B tier, but honestly, Volcanic Egg is a fairly... Well, B tier feels high. No, B tier feels right. I'm going to give it the bottom of B tier. Jellyfin, putting this right next to Foreign Fruit, same thing, completely pointless outside of extreme Gestures of the Drowned build. When this thing is up, it gives you an effective 83% damage reduction, which of course is a lot. That can turn almost any attack into paltry. But it's got a decently long cooldown. The elephant noise would get very annoying with enough gestures, and you would of course need a lot of gestures for it to be particularly effective. On command, like healing, survivability equipments can be decent, but I don't think Jellyfin is one of them. Jade Elephant, I'm just calling it Jellyfin out of instinct. Sawmorang, pretty solid equipment, in my opinion. I'm going to put this right behind DML. Not as easy to cheese Mithrix with, because you can't really fire and forget, really. But still, Somerang, super good. I know there is Somerang tech, but I haven't found the most uses for Somerang tech. But it is really good. If you just get right up close to a boss, throw out the blades, and then run backwards, they'll have, maybe 30 stacks of bleed on them, which is a solid amount of damage to have. And it's just in general useful. You press Q, does a lot of damage, it'll kill squishies pretty effectively, and the bleed should finish off anything tougher. Recycler, easy S tier, no doubt. Obviously, just lets you have a second chance at items. Cooldown is very long, and it's never bring this thing with gestures. But Recycler, totally fine. Totally fantastic is what I mean. Always nice to have, good for fishing, and also great to have on stage 4 to reroll your red from something like from a Ben's Raincoat into a Brilliant Behemoth or a Laser Scope or whatever it may be. Supermassive Leech, also going to put this next to Foreign Fruit because in my mind it's basically the same thing. Probably a slightly more effective Immortality build because it's 8 seconds of lifesteal. Get enough gestures and you'll have permanent uptime on that lifesteal. And the lifesteal is pretty substantial if I remember right. It's not something I have memorized, but it's I'm sure it has a use similar to a lot of these ones down here. I'm actually going to put Jelliphant and these above Gnarled Wood Sprite just because I think there's some more uses to them in cheese strats. Gorag's Opus, totally fine equipment, but nothing special. Gonna put it here. Gives you 50% attack speed, movement speed for your whole team. Good on equipment drones. Not too much else, though. Handy to have, just in general. Attack and speed buff is good, but it's not flashy, and I don't find Gorags winning me games very often. Forgive Me Please, another easy S tier. Forgive Me Please, honestly, could be the best item in the game. Honestly, I might leave it there. If you've never used Forgive Me Please, it is one of the most eye-opening experiences. You get 3 gestures, you'll always have multiple dolls on the ground, and then just get Chronic Expansion, and then get the rest of it as movement speed, run around for a minute and a half, and you will be doing 10 billion damage with every attack. It is ridiculous how good Forgive Me Please is. It also pairs really well, of course, Gasoline, Will-O-the-Wisp, even Monster Tooth it has some use with. Anything that has an on-kill effect, Forgive Me Please, is exceptional with. And it's just, there's some equipment, right, where they're very good, but they're very specific, i.e. Hellfire Tincture, or what am I thinking of? Who am I thinking of? The backup, for example, or Blast Shower, where you need an insane amount of items to make them work. Hellfire Tincture is definitely the most obvious one. But with Forgive Me Please, it's not even like that. It is so easy to get this thing almost permanent uptime, especially if you get a Soulbound Catalyst. It will be always up, and it will be always snowballing into more and more power. If you're trying to get the Forgotten Sun skins for all the survivors, just get Chronic Expansion and Forgive Me Please. The time it takes you to run up to his boss arena, you'll already be at such insane amounts of damage that it's not even funny. I have just absolutely trounced the Forgotten Sun each time I've done that with such ease. It's hilarious. Next up, we're on to the aspects. Now, the aspects are hard to rank because they have, a 1 in 1,000 drop chance? Or is it 1 in 10,000? It might be 1 in 10,000. When you kill an elite, they have a chance to drop their essence, which gives you their effect. So you become Blazing, or you become Glacial, or you become Overloading, or you become Malachite, or you become Celestial, or you become Mending. And the thing is, most of these just aren't very good. There's very niche circumstances for some of them, I think. But it's just, I think Celestial has some uses if you're in online play. But the thing is, these aren't even something you can build towards, because you could go 100 runs and not see one of these. I think the last time I saw one was, a year ago, which is crazy to say, but these things just don't drop. It's almost impossible for me to rank these. They're so rare, I think any utility they have is completely negated by the fact that they're almost impossible to get. I'm just going to put them all in D tier, because they're all just so rare, and a lot of them are completely pointless. Malachite, what are you going to do? Stop enemies from healing? They barely heal anyways. I'm just going to put them all in here. I think they're all, for the most part, very niche and very pointless. And I just don't care enough to go through them and try and find a use for them. If you're like an elite Essence defender, I can only assume you're playing with a mod that increases their drop rate because they're just so hard to get. Anyways, rant over. Trophy Hunter's Tricorn, totally solid equipment. Very useful for trying to set up things like Hellfire Tincture. Generally useful if a run's starting to go bad, but it's not completely lost yet. It can kill that boss and get you onto the next stage quickly. Of course, really good with any of the good boss items, Little Disciples, Shatter Spleens, the Perforators. Though, of course, it also is a little bit of like saving all of your good potions for the battle that never comes. You do need to find a place to use Tricorn before it becomes pointless, because you can't use it on Mithrix or anything like that. Yeah, Tricorn, really good. I'm probably going to drop it down to here, like right here, just because it's not quite as useful, in my opinion, as Crowdfunder or Prions. Gubo Jr. is a funny. I'm going to put it at the top of the funnies. I know Gubo has some specific survivor interactions. He's perfectly accurate with Railgunner, funnily enough. So if you have a Gummy Railgunner, he will always nail the shots. Like, he doesn't miss, as far as I know. I don't think it's even possible for him to miss. Really useful against Mithrix. So I'm honestly going to pump Gubo up. But it's mainly a meme equipment in my mind. It just doesn't really do that much. And while he's funny, he often just kind of stumbles around like an idiot, which again is funny to watch. Molotovs suck. One of the worst equipments in the game. Extremely short range. Their spread is random. The fire is contained to the ground, so it's almost pointless against flying bosses, which most of the annoying bosses are flying. You know, G-Constructs, Wandering Vagrants, Soulless Probes, the Ewu. Hell, even the Voidling, for example. He's technically a flying enemy. Yeah, Molotov sucks. I'm just going to put it down there because there's nothing more to say about Molotov. On the other hand, S tier. This is super good. Just lets you get a bunch of extra items. Also super useful in multiplayer. I love Credit Card. Super good, of course. You want to drop it before the moon, but honestly, it's just so good that it's always worth picking up if you see it, just for the few stages where it'll get you like 6 more items. Next up, we have Caffeinator, one of the most sleeper picks in the entire game. I am also going to put Squid Polyp here, because these guys are best friends. If you want to do a really funny run, stack a few Squid Polyps and get a Remote Caffeinator. I have legitimately soloed Mithrix with this strat, just by setting up Squid Polyps to then pound him with attacks that have insane knockback and damage, and I basically infinitely generate them because of the Remote Caffeinator. And of course, Caffeinator keeps you healthy. Also really good with fireworks, if you're a fireworks kind of enjoyer. If you've never done Squid Polyp Remote Caffeinator, go do it. It turned me through a Squid Polyp hater to a Squid Polyp lover. It's just really funny. And next up, we have Ahoy, obviously. This is easy S tier. It's the best item in the game. It says Ahoy. And finally, we have Seed of Life. Seed of Life, I'm going to drop it right next to Dio's, because this is an equipment version of Dio's best friend, while also having the utility of reviving your teammates. Once it's spent, it's very good on equipment drones, because they just turn these things out every couple seconds to be spitting out those healing orbs. And it just gives you a second life. It's great. It's really useful to have on hand. A little more common than Dio's. A little bit more reliable because of that, but obviously not quite as directly powerful as Dio's, because you have to give up your equipment slot for it. But it's just really solid. You know, there's nothing more to say about it. So that brings us to the end of the equipment tier list. And next, we have the Voids. I'll see you next time.